Hey there, scholars. My name is Ira McIntosh, and this is Hypothesis. Hey everyone, welcome back to my office. It's time for another episode of Hypothesis. And today's episode is really fun. I get the chance to sit down and talk to a scholar who's researching Appalachia and researching first generation low income students in West Virginia, which I'll be honest is not a topic that I had considered. We talk about this in the episode, but I guess my knowledge of West Virginia is reduced to a lot of stereotypes and is just what media feeds to me in terms of hillbillies and moonshine and really rural inbred communities, which is crazy. And I've never taken the time to sit down and deconstruct that. So I'm really excited that I had the chance to talk to my guest about this and start to rewire some of those connections and find out more of what it's like for students in West Virginia to go to school and to want to get out of that situation, and also how West Virginia can kind of revitalize itself. So it's a really interesting episode, and I hope you think so as well. My guest today is Shan Cawley. Shan is a PhD candidate, poet, and hobbyist painter who resides in Morgantown, West Virginia with her partner and two cats, Mirabelle and Magpie. Shan's area of study is higher education, and more specifically, the academic and socio-emotional experiences of West Virginia native first-generation low-income college students. As a West Virginia first generation low income college student herself, Shan knows the transformative power of higher education and its ability to change and sustain West Virginia lives and livelihoods. When Shan isn't editing her dissertation or working as a full-time professional in West Virginia University's Honors College as the Research Apprenticeship Program Coordinator, she is reading about pop culture, watching her partner perform with his band, or having a good old time with her best friends. Everyone, please welcome to the pod, Shan Cawley. And have an incredible conversation.
I think so too.
But I also just want to start by talking about this artwork that you have on the wall behind you. I
Oh,
love that
yes.
you have Moth Man.
So that is Liz Pavlovic. For those who don't know, Liz Pavlovic is a Morgantown, West Virginia based artist. She's amazing. She's really found her niche here in West Virginia, which is really difficult to do, especially with the arts because of just like how, historically the industry has worked in the state. But she has done like art for like beer cans and like breweries and has art on the side of a bus in Charleston. Like it's super cool. And I just have come to learn and love everything about West Virginia. So if that
It's
tells you
amazing.
anything about where I am.
Amazing. Well, let's start off by you telling me a little bit about your academic journey, what got you to your PhD, like why academia, where did your brain go to get you to that place?
Yeah, so I grew up as an only child in West Virginia. I was born in 97. So if you kind of want a place where I would be at culturally during my adolescence, a few years before 9/11, and I was part of the generation that just kind of never got to experience like any of the United States, any of that kind of like fun stuff that I see my parents kind of like being really reminiscent of. So that's kind of where I'm at. I was born in West Virginia, and I was just a really lonely kid. We grew up pretty poor. My mom was a maid, pharmacy tech, lots of like very blue collar jobs that didn't really pay a lot. And my father was an alcoholic who had this very strange job of going to different fraternal order of police stations here in the country, calling local businesses and then selling them tickets to an oldie show. That was literally his job. There was some person named like Roy Radin or something, or someone like that. My uncle was telling me about it, where they would sell tickets for like Broadway shows. It was a very like sketchy endeavor that he was in. So he didn't have a real job, really. So my mom was the one that was out there actually doing the work. Like sometimes would have two jobs, right? So, poverty is a huge thing in West Virginia, unfortunately, just because of the way that the industry is. And neither of my parents were college educated, and I felt that lack of education and experience in every room I walked in as a kid, every classroom. Like I just felt that kind of like cognitive dissonance between my family and the families of other folks. So I graduated high school near middle of my class, was not, I could do the academics when I tried. I got all A's. I just wasn't motivated, very depressed as a high school student, definitely a troubled teen. And then I came to college and it changed my life totally. It didn't matter that I came from a really poor family who made less than $27,000 a year, according to my FAFSA form, which is crazy to think about. It didn't matter who my parents were and weren't. These kind of little things matter in West Virginia towns, if you could even believe it. Like the sociological aspect of being from West Virginia is fascinating. None of that mattered because we were all on a level playing field. And it was the first time where I didn't have to depend on my parents to take me to like class or extracurriculars. Like I had my own 2 feet in public transportation. So I went to WVU from 2016 to 2020. Changed my life, was learning from professors who had PhDs from like Berkeley. And I'll never forget, it was my first literary criticism class I had with Adam Komisarak, who has his PhD from Berkeley. And it was insane. We learned about Derrida and Lacan and all of these crazy theorists who had these strange ideas. That's where I learned about Marxism for the first time. And it just bloomed something in me. So I knew at that moment that I wanted to pursue graduate study and become a researcher. And why? I didn't know, but I knew that I loved it. So I became a new student orientation leader for WVU. In that process essentially is where you are a student leader for the summer. Students come, thousands of students, because WVU is a huge school. They come for their first day of orientation, and I was lucky enough to be hired to kind of lead them. There's a really funny kind of like stereotype of them on TikTok of being loud. Annoying, and I was definitely that super overexcited college student. But I bring that up because that is what had me pursue a master's of education in higher education at the University of Pittsburgh. I got my master's degree there during COVID. Terrible experience during COVID. My eyesight is ruined from being on my computer all the time, and I didn't necessarily like my program for some reasons. Love the people in my cohort, love them. Love some of the professors I had, like Dr. Gina Garcia, Dr. Doris Means, amazing, wonderful people that opened my eyes up as a white scholar practitioner of the struggles and the tribulations and the triumphs of Black and Brown students, which was really great and something that I needed as someone that was coming from a primarily white institution. And then that experience led me to come back to WVU to get my PhD. And what's funny about that is that my program was one of the programs that was cut during academic transformation, meaning that my PhD isn't a teach out plan. So we can touch on this for sure. But my PhD dissertation essentially at this moment is all about West Virginia first generation low income college students, WVFGLI. I believe it was coined mostly from someone who was in my program before. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure the literature kind of starts with her. WVFGLI students, Rachel Nyman. And I am just kind of expanding on that scholarship and that conceptual framework that she introduced to study the academic and social transitionary experiences of that student population as they enter and exit public four-year institutions in the state of West Virginia. what that means in layman's terms, because I always feel like I get super kind of like in the clouds, especially since this work is supposed to like impact positively students like me who may not have, known what that would mean. It's essentially just looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly of what these students experience when they come into higher education and exit. Like, what do their GPAs look like? What are the struggles that they face? Like, for example, and this is anecdotal, I was in college and I had a friend in SJ whose parents paid for his rent and groceries. Oh, oh my God, that was crazy to me. So while the playing field is a lot more level, at least in my initial experience, there's still those little things that make the retention and success rates of West Virginia first generation low income students really, really difficult. So what I'm hoping to do with my study after I make very necessary edits to my dissertation. Thank you to my advisor for sticking with me. But after I make those very necessary edits to the conceptual framework that I am working with, I'm just gonna chat with some students, do 3 interviews with them. I'm a qualitative girly through and through, and then I'm just gonna use thematic analysis to see what those experiences look like, especially kind of in the landscape of today. So that is a very long-winded explanation of who I am and why I'm sitting in front of you on a Zoom box.
No, that's amazing. When I asked you to be on the podcast, and then when I started reading the stuff that you sent me, it really kind of caused me to self-reflect on my this is going to sound really terrible, but my thoughts of West Virginia, just because growing up in the North, there's this, and I
Say it.
think
It's the conception.
back,
Yeah.
yeah, but backing up just slightly, there's still a conception in the North that the South is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Just it is what it is. And obviously we need to work on that. Obviously, like, the Civil War truly never ended. But there are certain states that still have this really kind of terrible reputation in the North, and one of them is West Virginia. And thinking about it, I of course know that there are intelligent, smart, and wildly creative people that live there, but in my mind, the thing that sticks the most from what I've been taught about is moonshine and hillbillies and things like that, because of the propaganda that we've been fed in the North and outside of the state of West Virginia in general, to the point where I honestly, if I looked at a map of the United States, and geography is already not my biggest, best strong suit, but if I looked at a map, I don't know if I could point out West Virginia on the map.
For sure.
And so I got really excited because this is selfishly, this is my chance to learn a little bit, not to say you're the only ambassador to tell everything about West Virginia, but this is my chance to kind of start breaking down those stereotypes that I have in my head. And I was wondering if maybe you must be aware of those stereotypes, and if you could maybe talk a little bit about where some of those came from, and then also why they're wrong.
Yeah, so there is literally a book about this that I recommend to everyone. It's called What You're Getting Wrong About Appalachia by Elizabeth Catt. I read it for my Appalachian Research Methods course. Shout out Dr. Melissa Sherfinsky. She is the GOAT. She is beloved. I love her. And we literally had an entire class where we were talking about these stereotypes as Native West Virginians and where they come from. So, West Virginia is a state of like resistance and resilience. Like, we were out there with our handkerchiefs just shooting away at folks on the Battle of Blair Mountain. Like, we have always defended our beautiful mountains that we love so much. And a lot of that stereotype comes from the exploitative kind of industries that have been here. Like, think about coal mining in coal towns. It's insane. The currency was given to you by like the coal town, and you could only use it at certain stores in the coal town. Like they paid for your housing, they paid for your food. Obviously, down the dusty timeline of history, that's still going to have an impact on public perception and how we see ourselves. I mean, steel industry too. It was the same exact thing. I'm from Weirton, West Virginia. It was literally founded in the early 1900s as a steel town. They
Mm.
owned your ass. They owned your housing. They owned where you slept. They owned where you worked. You could only use, certain currency at certain stores. It was insane. So when these industries were no more, around like the 70s, 80s, when things I think kind of started to shift for these places, different policies impacted where steel or coal was coming from, X, Y, and Z. These areas became incredibly economically depressed and still are struggling to find any type of industry that can help them. So I know growing up in West Virginia, it was always just like, oh, I hate living here. Everybody's so stupid. But it was kind of built by design. Like we have been exploited as a state and as a people for everything that we have. If you go down in the South and you look in the South of West Virginia and all of like how the land has been exploited for water, the drinking water down there isn't good. If you look in Weirton, West Virginia, the drinking water isn't good either. Like it's so much of our environment has been destroyed by industry. So
Mm.
those industry titans are really the reason why these stereotypes exist today, because they came into our regions, they exploited our people, they exploited our geographic land, and they left us with absolutely nothing, and we've been trying to pick up the pieces ever since. And if you look at the eastern panhandle of West Virginia, for example, where my partner is from, it is like Virginia Junior. You would literally think that you were in Nova Ira. It is insane. They have cute little coffee shops and a revitalized downtown and plant shops, and they have like these beautiful walks about nothing on Main Street. Like it's a dream for someone like me that loves something like Gilmore Girls and always wanted that
Mm.
in my small town. But if you go back to Weirton, despite them having a new battery plant and that bringing in some jobs in the area, the downtown where the mill was is dusty. There's not a lot of businesses down there. There's no foot traffic. And a lot of that is because people do not see value in West Virginia for
Mhm.
whatever reason, because of that vicious cycle of that stereotype that you mentioned. And even we, as West Virginians growing up, we're kind of taught to not like our state, making jokes about hillbillies, making jokes about people missing teeth. But those were the same people that were out there defending, Blair Mountain. It's not, it makes it seem like it's the fault of the people of West Virginia that we've been left high and dry, but it's just the people that wanted to make a profit off of our bodies and our beautiful land.
Well, and within what you just said, there are a couple things. The first off is it just to illustrate the industry town and how those worked for people who know series of unfortunate events. That's what the lumber mill was based on, was that you get paid in coupons basically that are only good within the walls of the lumber mill. And
Uh-huh.
if you try to go outside of it, you are giving up your entire life. It basically is kind of a cult, and it pulls you in and keeps you there and does
Yeah.
not let you leave. And then when the CEO decides, okay, great, we're done, and leaves, there are no pieces to pick up. And then when you said that the idea that uh, West Virginia is still trying to pick pieces up and fix itself, but all of that only ended in the 70s and 80s. That wasn't that long ago. That was just before I was born in 90. So that was literally just a few years before I was born that those companies left. So of course it's going to take it could take 100 200 years to really revitalize after something like that happens. So it's going to take a while, and it's unfortunate that the stereotypes are holding it back from that revitalization process.
And you see kind of like that hostility and that anger towards not having an economy and it being really depressed, even in like Facebook groups. There's a group
Mm.
called Weirton Talk. And I'm sure, maybe you're a part of community groups in your hometown. I don't know if you grew up in like a city or a smaller town in the north. But that hostility is even felt when people are just posting random community measures. Like there are
Mm.
so many attempts to revitalize like the northern part of West Virginia, whatever barriers folks may face, but that hostility is felt like within the community. I've always felt that. It's always been so fascinating to me as someone who, my parents weren't born in West Virginia. My dad was born in Illinois. My mom was born in Ohio. Her dad had some roots in West Virginia, but I am the one who was like kind of a first generation West Virginian. So I didn't have the kind of rosy colored glasses of my parents going to my high school and then being friends with like my teachers, the coaches, X, Y, and Z. So being able to see that small town kind of without that has always been so fascinating to me because there's so much hostility in the way that people act. Mostly, I think primarily, even though this is completely unconsciously by the, folks that live there, is that they are just so impacted by that lack of economy. Like a lot of people will go and drive to Pittsburgh, which is 30 minutes away to work because housing is cheaper in West Virginia. Like that industry lives in other places that are not within the northern part of the state. And it's fascinating to see how that can impact just like the community at large.
Well, and I do want to get to your research topic in a moment, but I think these topics kind of lay a groundwork for where it's coming from. And then so the other thing that I think of when I think about Appalachia in general is the kind of mythology that has gripped the rest of the country, that when you say Appalachia to people, people immediately are like, oh, you don't go into the woods at night, oh, you have a broom above your door, oh, you do that kind of thing. And so it's interesting that you have these two things that go hand in hand, that you have a a community of people that have been left in the dust by industry, that have been used up and spit out. And then those are the same people that we then are like, okay, so they're the like earthy ones that know the land and they're part of the spirituality of the country, and we should look to them for our folk tales and our music and all of those things. And it's, yes, there's amazing music that comes out of Appalachia. That's, if you're going to say there is true American culture, that's probably the closest you're gonna get to it because of how those traditions came about. But it's so telling that in the United States, all we can figure out to do with a group of people that have been stripped of everything, including their own dignity, is to mythologize them. I mean, you see the same thing with the indigenous people of the United States as well, that we mythologize them and say, oh, they understand the earth better than everyone because of this and this and this. And it becomes this, I don't even know how to put it, becomes this like
It strips them of
ethos
their
of,
humanity in a way. Yeah.
exactly, yes.
Yeah. It's like on the opposite side of how like black people when Christopher Columbus came, they were seen as like savages and brutalists for no right. Like the way that people
Mhm.
are kind of characterized, I think would be a
Yeah.
good way to put it. And there is that magic in that mystic anywhere and everywhere in the world. It's just where you find it in different places. But we had Anne Pancake, who is a writer in West Virginia and Appalachia, and she one time said that Appalachia is a prophecy. And when she said that to me, everything else went
Mhm.
blank, and it kind of changed a lot of things for me to hear that because
Mhm.
Appalachia is really prophetic. Like a lot of the exploitation that we've seen here, we're starting to see elsewhere, even in like the good, educated northern states, right? Like it
Mhm.
totally acts as a type of prophecy. And while I do find that Appalachia and West Virginia, especially among the hills, can be beautiful and mystic, it's people are just that people. We are just people. We're
Mm.
all different. Some of us are highly educated and some of us are not, and that is perfectly okay. And I feel like West Virginia at times can kind of feel like an instant pot of culture because it's so, it is so diverse in so many different places, but we feel like we have to subscribe to one type, which is the redneck hillbilly who's drinking moonshine on a couch on their porch with all of their teeth missing. And somewhere, someone in West Virginia is doing that somewhere, and that is perfectly fine. I do think that a lot of conversations about West Virginia and denying that stereotype is kind of pushing away to kind of protect your own safety in your own class. When I've sat there and kind of reflected on why people were so kind of hesitant to kind of accept that that stereotype is a part of the population of the very diverse state that is West Virginia. But there's so many different people and so many different mini cultures that live in the state. Something that I want to shout out that's from West Virginia and from a WVU alum is YNST Magazine. You're Not Just Seeing Things magazine by Adam Payne and co. It is amazing. It is like the Vogue of West Virginia. It is so cool. They showcase all of our amazing young artists and singers and poets and writers. So for those of you who are, listening to this podcast, you should definitely go and check it out. And it is a really cool way to see that stereotype broken, but also honestly kind of embraced too, because those
Mm.
hillbillies are still a part of of our culture, and that's totally okay. They're not representative of the whole, but that doesn't mean that they don't still exist. So
Yeah. Well, and it's just speaking from my experience, there are towns like that in Washington State. They did have logging towns that worked the same way. And even
yeah,
Eastern Washington to a certain extent gets overlooked. And I think the reason why Washington can kind of get a good name for itself and have the rest of the country kind of look to it as one of the major cities is because we have Seattle, and the Seattle basically speaks for the entire state because because of the population. Unfortunately, that's how it works. Even though east of the mountains is extremely red, and you go over to the peninsula or onto the islands, and each island has its own culture. Like it's not Washington is nowhere near being a monoculture, but you have that. You have tech has come in and completely changed the landscape, and so you have these kind of basically we got rid of the old industries and brought in the new industries, and so because of that, we were able to forge a new kind of propaganda that got like most people don't know Washington's connection to the Alaska Gold Rush or the fires that happened that burned down multiple cities or the stock exchanges that were in Spokane. Like that we don't talk about those histories because we would be going back to a sort of culture that wouldn't be respected by the powers that be because it's not profitable to them.
yeah,
But West Virginia doesn't have a city like that, and the new industry hasn't moved in for better or for worse.
yeah. I mean,
And the
there are.
proximity to the capital, like you're in so many shadows.
Yeah, and I love that you said that because I never thought of it like that. And so many shadows. That's so true. Like we have Pittsburgh, that's kind of seen as the Paris of Appalachia, which I love. That's where my partner and I want to end up because it is close to West Virginia, but literally all of our friends are there and we just need to be with them. But
Mm,
yeah, we are overshadowed by a lot. The capital is right there. Pittsburgh isn't big enough to really kind of have its own thing, even though I do feel like it's a little bit up and coming. And as someone that's like from West Virginia, I've always seen Washington as like, whoa, this amazing grand place that like I wanted to live in. I remember on Picnic, I don't know if you ever used Picnic to edit your photos, they had the stock image of the public market.
I shook my head no, and then you said edit your photos, and it all came rushing back. Oh my
Oh,
god.
There was this photo of the public market, and I would sit there and I would edit that damn photo for
Mm,
hours, just being like, I wish I lived there. Like, I have always been so city obsessed as
mm,
like someone that's from West Virginia, because my people were always people like you, right? Like urbanites who were out doing drag and doing really cool shit. Like, there were not a lot of queer people like me in West Virginia. And if they were queer, they
mm.
were extremely closeted. And, being queer, you got made fun of, not as bad as I think it would have been if it was earlier in time, but it still wasn't widely accepted. And there was never really that much queer culture in West Virginia. There is
Mm.
pockets, like especially when you enter adulthood. But as a kid, like there was no one cool like you that was like gonna do drag in Seattle or New York City. So it was just, I don't know. I've always seen New York and Seattle as kind of like these meccas, which again may be a wrong stereotype. I don't know.
I mean, I I personally wouldn't call Seattle a mecca, but I can see how it could be for people. Like I totally get that. It didn't have the uh it didn't have landscapes that I appreciated when I lived there. And now that I've moved away, I'm just like, oh, I miss the water and I miss the forests and I miss these things.
Yeah.
But and the culture I just didn't figure out until I left. It's one of those things where you have to like step away for a while and then you're like, oh, okay, wait a second. Now I get it. But now I don't live there, so I don't need to get it.
Baby, you're in
But
France.
right. So I mean, all of these places have um their own demons to deal with. And it's funny to me that you say that Pittsburgh is up and coming because I mean, as someone who loves history, Pittsburgh is such an important city to the country. Same with like Cleveland, like the cities that basically built America and then again were left behind
Yeah.
in the industrial shift, as it were. But yeah, I don't know, it feels so wrong to have to say that Pittsburgh is up and coming because in my mind, as someone who loves that history and was so in Washington, we're taught so much labor union history. And so, in my mind, Pittsburgh and Cleveland and those cities all come to mind when I think of labor unions because of the steel unions and the coal unions and all of those people. And so, I guess I'm not that I'm out of touch, but I think I have a little bit of a rosy viewpoint on those cities because I see what built them.
Yeah.
um and I think that's one reason why states like West Virginia are a little bit dimmer in my mind because I don't have that touch point outside of um outside of movies or outside of stereotypes. So but let's talk a little bit about your research now because your research is looking into first generation students from West Virginia. And I think the conversation about first generation students so often doesn't center. I'm This whole episode, I'm just like second guessing how I'm saying everything because I feel like I'm not not coming at any of these topics from the correct direction. But I feel like white people talk about first generation students in a very kind of classist, racist way a lot of times. And
Yeah.
so thinking about white rural people being first generation students is a topic that isn't considered very often.
Yeah.
Um, so tell me a little bit more about what that experience is like and really what topics within that are really like pulling at you.
Yeah, one of the limitations of my study is the fact that my participant pool likely is going to be primarily white for the reasons that you said, because West Virginia is a primarily white state, first and foremost, and West Virginia University, which is where I'm assuming most of my participants will come from, despite it being open to any student in West Virginia attending a four-year public institution, that they will also be white. So that's definitely one of the limitations that I'm going to face, as much as I would love to get that kind of like person of color perspective. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it. And a lot of the people that have done the research that I'm doing have also had those limitations as well. I think down the line, it would be nice to look specifically at Black and Brown and other race kind of experiences in rurality and what that looks like, because those people obviously do exist. And because of their race, their experience is going to look completely different than someone who, is in a white rural area. But some of the things that kind of pull to me and kind of speak to me within that research is kind of the differences between a first generation low income student from somewhere like Washington, we use that as an example, versus West Virginia. So when you're a West Virginia first generation low income student like myself or like other students, there's a lot of extra barriers that are kind of preventing you from being as successful as you possibly could. One of them, of course, is your identity, right? If you don't have parents that have experienced the system, and let me tell you, as someone that works in higher ed and is currently doing a PhD program full time, it is a system that feels impossible to navigate sometimes, especially as a first gen low income student. So you have that, especially when you're from West Virginia, like even the geography is a challenge because of the mountains. Like this is something that I didn't really even recognize until I started doing research for my dissertation and wanted to find out kind of what that looked like, some of the background information for my literature review that I would need to kind of ground what I'm doing. A lot of students, if a college is more than 60 miles away, if they're rural, they're not going to go, because a lot of these students have very close ties to their family. That's something that's a little bit different about a West Virginia first generation low income student versus someone who might be from the rest of the country, is that one of the traditional values of being from Appalachia that was kind of established, during that industry that we saw during steel towns and logging and what have you, what type of industry, is that family was everything. The dad would go out to provide for the family. And those ideals, those traditions have been passed down from generation to generation. So even today in 2026, that student is prioritizing their family over everything. And I haven't seen the numbers yet. It really depends on my participants, but I am wondering how much faith is going to play a role in this as well. Faith is in just how comfortable that student is leaving their hometown, their family, to go to somewhere like Morgantown or Huntington, which may seem really scary, really urban. They may find that it's dangerous because one of the aspects of living in a rural place is that you're not going to see that many people. You might see a deer pass by. Sometimes we get coyotes. It really depends on how they're feeling, but you're not going to be used to being around a lot of people in a smaller space. So that means, naturally more crime might occur, that stereotype that student is kind of bringing to that campus. And that connection to family can lead to a lot of barriers for West Virginia students. They feel like a sense of guilt. I know, speaking for me personally, my parents obviously didn't go to college, and I feel that cognitive dissonance with my mother often when we speak because of my education. So that kind of fear, I think, plays in the back of the minds of West Virginia first generation low income college students when they go off to these institutions. And that's just transitioning into, right? So that's the first half of my study. When you start thinking about how these students are transitioning out of college, that opens another can of worms. Like, what are their jobs going to look like? For West Virginia first generation low income students specifically, like we've been talking about this entire episode, there's no industry. What happens when there's no industry? People aren't going to stay. Like, there's some programs within the state that are offering remote workers like these fellowships or whatever, or money to move to West Virginia, work remotely, join these communities, and that's great and that's good, but that's not available to West Virginia native people. Often we have to leave our own state to then go and be successful, whatever successful means, whether that's simply climbing the ladder or making a shit ton of money doing whatever. That definition is going to look different for every West Virginian first generation low income college student. So we're leaving the state as we graduate. We don't get to stay. That's unfortunate. Student loan rates too. I haven't looked exactly at the numbers because, like I said, still need to edit some parts of the dissertation. But I would assume that our first gen students probably default at a higher rate on student loans than maybe other
Mm.
gen students in the country, because you're taking out more loans because your family simply doesn't have it. Being low income can oftentimes look a lot poorer than it does in like a city like New York City or in Seattle, right? Those are kind of some issues and some barriers, like being a first generation student too, working during college, whether you're transitioning into the institution or out of, you're working in a food service job, right? Are you just going to remain in that food service job, or are you going to get a job in the industry that your degree is in? There's all of these
Mm.
different things that kind of exist within this social identity that I find to be really fascinating. Obviously, anecdotal too, because it is my lived experience, but I am so interested to hear what my participants have to tell me about their experiences transitioning into and out of higher education institutions in the state.
Do you think that do you think one of those barriers is mistrust in the system, because academia can seem very classist and traditionally has been very classist? So there's a willingness to find every little fault and use that against it as a reason to leave it or not
Yeah.
start in the first place.
Yeah, I love that question. So, I mean, for me, and what Rachel Lyman did in her dissertation was really talk about the persistence of first
Mm.
generation students in this realm, right? Like, are they persisting? Like, for me, I remember when I first came to college, this is anecdotal, but I could not afford the housing department or
Mhm.
deposit. It was the housing deposit that I couldn't afford. It was $250, and then the academic deposit was like $250. $500 for a low income student might as well have been 50,000. Like, we did not have that
Mhm.
shit. So I had to just sit there and fight and advocate for myself. And thank God I had some form of self advocacy somewhere in my body so that I got the financial aid office to just add it onto my fall bill because we couldn't afford it. If I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have been able to go to college. A lot of these students don't know how to do that. I don't know where that came from in me, but a lot of these students still face things like that and just simply not go to college. There's so much mistrust in the system of higher education, and I don't blame them, because a huge thing in higher ed is how bloated it's become with administrators, and how, historically it's just been like faculty members and students, but the amount of student services that have popped up within the past 10, 20, 30 years are kind of making the system bigger and more intimidating for students to use. Like, in the students that I work with, for example, they struggle, first generation or not, they struggle a lot with like email communication and advocating for themselves anyway, like what they want. I find that I have to ask a lot more prompting questions of these students than I would have had a decade ago with my peers to figure out what they want and what they need. Now imagine, a student who had parents that went to college that struggled with that. Now, imagine a student whose parents didn't go to college, likely had blue collar jobs. Maybe their dad was a coal miner, a farmer, a logger, what have you. How are they expected to work through that system? And a lot of the times they don't.
Yeah. Well, and all of that aside, you have just one of the things that's come up multiple times on the podcast, and I will continue talking about because it's important, is how much of an ivory tower the academia can be, in that the barriers, even to those who have parents who have gone through higher ed, and the basic language is understood already, and the kind of culture is part of them. There's still a huge learning curve when you get there, in terms of how to comport yourself, how to get to class, how to find a classroom, the language that professors use or invent to make themselves feel smarter. Like there's just there are so many things that academia has invented as ways to keep people out that I can only imagine being not only a first generation, but a first generation low income person who is used to having to work for every single thing you get and work harder than everyone else for every little thing you get. You finally get into this institution that you think could be a ticket out, and then there are yet more barriers, and there's more barriers and more barriers, and I can only imagine that it wears you down faster than it would any other students.
I will say the WVU is aware of this since it is a flagship institution. And despite my grievances with academic transformation and the way that went down, the institution within its heart and soul does a really good job of breaking those barriers down because they have the most compassionate and caring and wonderful human beings that are staffed and on faculty.
Mm,
Like I said, I went to WVU for undergrad and then I go to Pitt. Pitt's also an R1, but they're a research based institution, right? WVU is a land grant institution. You would think that those wouldn't really matter in your experience, but it meant everything. Pitt was all about that ivory tower, whether it was, in interactions with the program coordinator for my master's degree or my boss for my graduate assistantship. Like it was all about that decorum, that professionalism. There was no room, it felt like, for any type of personality, anything that would kind of question the status quo. And coming from an institution like WVU, it wasn't like that. Everybody here, Ira, is so nice and kind. And if there's any stereotype that I could get out to anyone listening to this about West Virginia, is that we have the damn nicest people on earth that live here and work here. Like the people that work at WVU, like my colleagues especially, are the most caring and lovely and wonderful people and do their best with the systems that we are expected to kind of work within. And they're always doing their best so that the students can have the best possible experience. It's really interesting to see two institutions that are classified on the Carnegie system exactly the same, only an hour and a half away from each other. How different those experiences were. Like you still have world
mm,
class faculty at WVU that are doing really hard, important scientific and creative inquiry, as Pitt. But the way that people behaved at Pitt was a lot different than kind of how chill and nice and kind it was at WVU.
mm.
Had everything to do and more with the ivory tower that you often bring up on your podcast. And please keep talking about it because it needs to be justified for sure.
Well, and do you find I this is me actually genuinely curious and not in any way leading because I don't know I really don't know the politics of the state of West Virginia. Do those play into who goes to university and who doesn't? Because I know there's a lot of people in red states that don't like universities because they quote unquote turn people liberal. And so this is me just curious what that relationship kind of plays out as in West Virginia.
Yeah, so I love this question, and I'm sure that plays into the decision for a lot of students. But a lot of students are willing, like a lot of us want to go to college to just get some type of experience that looks like the rest of the country. Like, I
Mm,
feel like for me and my classmates, like, yeah, we just wanted to go to a university or a college that had ample resources that we were not used to. Our textbooks were falling apart. I graduated high school in 2016, our facilities were falling apart. Weirdly, all of the sports facilities were fine, had $1 million
oh,
football
funny how
turf.
that happens.
Yeah, $1 million football turf for, a team that hadn't won since the 90s, what have you, whatever. Everything was falling apart. So I think for a lot of us, at least in Weirton, don't know what the vibe is like at other high schools of students that are graduating. Like, you just want resources. You want to be able to study whatever you've been dreaming of studying your whole life, have those ample resources, meet other students from West Virginia. Like, be able to go and live on your own and kind of, have like a Chick-fil-A or something there. I know these things sound so small, but a lot of us just want to want to have that experience, that more urban, more resourceful experience that we don't typically get in West Virginia. So my answer is yes, probably some people for sure. They probably then go to like either private institutions here in the state or in the tri-state area of like, Pennsylvania or Ohio. But most of the time, like we just want to get away from our hometown and experience something.
Yeah, I think that's a universal experience, honestly, because even, I mean, maybe New York is different because it's New York and you can kind of experience the whole world in one city. But I mean, even in Seattle, so many of us were just like, I want to go across the country. I want to go to LA. I want to go to Florida. I want to, like, so many people just wanted to get out that I think that's really it's really a universal experience that we all want to experience new things. And if we aren't given the chance to, eventually some people give up on that and get better and move forward in their lives in that space.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important that we get the chance to do that, because that's how you learn. The moving around and meeting new people and finding out how different people live their lives and see their existence, that's how you learn. It's not the sitting in a classroom necessarily that's going to make you, that's going to open your mind. Sure, it can introduce ideas, but the opening of your mind and the understanding your place in the greater positioning of humanity, I guess that sounds more grandiose than I mean it, but just thinking outside of yourself occurs when you're meeting new people and having to learn how other people communicate and figure out your relationships to them and with them.
Yeah.
It's such a universal experience.
And I think it's so fascinating how you and your friends and peers in Seattle were like, I want to get away. That's crazy because for me, oh my gosh, like I would have loved to live in Seattle. Like I see, like especially since you said you were born in '90, so jealous. I'm literally so jealous that you got to have that whole decade. I know you like
I
could
mean,
barely
I wish I had.
I
I was
know.
homeschooled, so I didn't get to experience grunge when it was happening. But also, I mean, grunge was over by the time I really kind of was experiencing the world. So
Oh,
really, I grew up in the early 2000s, but I was around. I saw those people when we would drive around. We would drive around Capitol Hill, and I saw the like crazy hair and the flannel and the punks wandering around with their Liberty spikes and things, and it's just like, what is that? I don't get it. And now I'm just like,
I love it. I love
probably
it.
drove past some of those really famous people every once in a while. But
Totally.
um something that I've been dealing with myself as someone who left home and left my home country, especially with everything going on, is the kind of guilt that's associated with leaving certain leaving situations, um and ultimately knowing that it's the best decision to make, but there's also that kind of like, yeah, but couldn't isn't there something that I could be doing back home? And I think that in that way I can relate to those students who have trouble leaving their families, because I can imagine there is that guilt associated with that, especially if you come from a family that's been in one industry for a long time and you're the one that's saying, hey, no, I actually want to go to college. I don't want to be in the family industry. Um, so I could only imagine that that's another part of why the retention rate for um first generation students is where it is that is there's not just a wanting to be around family, but a kind of guilt of from leaving them.
And I imagine that return on investment, like ROI, you'll see higher ed loves acronyms, but it's increasing, right? Like I mean,
Mm.
unless you get like a bachelor's degree, especially here in West Virginia, in like engineering, nursing, bio, and like chem, those sciences don't even cut it anymore. Unless you get super like specific professional degrees, your return on investment will probably be negative. Like mine is negative. I went to college. I studied English and women and gender studies, which so proud of it. In my mind, it's worth $1 million, but not in the eyes of our
Hmm.
president. Whatever, I don't care. I, went for a master's degree in higher education, and now I'm getting a PhD in higher education. And my return on investment versus the loans that I had to take out because I singularly funded my entire education is negative. That's the financial sacrifice that I took. I wouldn't recommend it to literally anyone else but myself. But a lot of fellow first generation low income students find themselves in the same way. Like a lot of folks end up quitting college halfway through or within the first year because they find that they're taking out way more in student loans to pay for it than they would even make, which is
Hmm.
crazy. And West Virginia University is still fairly affordable, kind of, with loans, but it's also we get a lot of out of state people, especially from Jersey, because in-state institutions in Jersey, even if they're in-state for those students, way more
Yeah.
expensive than WVU. So I feel like ROI definitely plays a huge part in that retention as well.
Mm. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky in that I grew up in a house where my mom was an educator and my dad was a judge. And from an early age, yes, they wanted us to be successful, but there was also this understanding that education in and of itself had worth, and it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a means to an end. But I do understand the desire and the necessity for education to be a means to an end, because there's so many places where if you don't have that degree, you can't get a job. Even if
Yeah.
that job even if that job is at Starbucks, like you're competing with people who have higher ed degrees trying to get those jobs, and of course Starbucks is going to pick the people that that make them look good. So
Well, I
even to be competitive in retail, you have to look the part on paper.
Yeah, I mean, I worked at Trader Joe's in Pittsburgh, and I worked with
So
like Carnegie.
jealous.
It was Ira, favorite people of all time. Like literally the best, amazing. Oh, I loved working there. It was so fun. Trader Joe's 630. I miss you every day. But I worked with like a Carnegie Mellon University trained scientists, engineers, X, Y, and Z, and a lot of people, like especially academic adjacent, were just so over the bullshit of academia, and I cannot say I blame them. Like they would rather go and work at Trader Joe's and do whatever that labor, which very hard labor, by the way, entails, than have to deal with the bullshit of academia, which also comes comfort. My office is so beautiful and comfortable. Flexibility. I have the best benefits and so much sick time, and it's incredible. But that also comes with dealing with a huge bureaucracy that takes up so much of my time every day,
Yeah.
that's so ingrained in every single higher education institution in the United States, that people were willing to leave their career fields to just go to Trader Joe's and work. And we're finding that
Yeah.
with a lot of industries and a lot of people.
I'm honestly kind of excited for the moment where higher ed kind of breaks and all of the boomers are gone and all of the millennials come in and we're like, we're tired of being tired. Let's figure this out, guys.
Because I study, obviously, I study a very specific subgroup within higher education, but I study it as a whole. I'm looking at trends, I'm looking at numbers, and there is an enrollment bust coming, people. So, obviously, past the year 2008, when everybody was losing their homes and people were getting divorced, and you and I were likely playing Wii Bowling in the background as this is happening. People weren't having kids. Like our generation right now, especially, isn't having kids. I'm 28. I
Yeah.
don't want to kid until I'm literally 40 because I cannot financially afford it within the next decade, just being honest.
Yeah.
But there are no kids to go to college. So like we've seen pretty big enrollment numbers the past few years. These are going to steadily decline a little bit and then just drop off because no
Yeah.
one is having children. So what happens then when there's an enrollment bust? People are already scrambling for students, scrambling. Like they will take a corpse if they can with a heartbeat just so they can get their money. Like just higher
Mm-hmm.
education institutions oftentimes now operate like a business. And it's
Mm-hmm.
very, very scary. So when we see that enrollment bust, they're going to be fighting for students even more. We're going to see some really crazy shit, and we will see institutions shutter left and right, and it will be terrifying. Can't
It
wait.
will be. I think part of me is excited for that though, because there are some schools that kind of need to shut, but it also it allows situations like that allow for innovation, and they allow for changing how we consider education. I mean, something that I've started noticing is the number of students who are going back to school. Like, I'm one of them. I went back and got a second master's in my 30s because I
Mhm.
didn't like where my life was. And so I decided to go back to school to change the course and be able to career change. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that, of people who maybe have held off going to school until their mid 20s and then decide, okay, now it's time, I'm going to go to school now. So, but because of that, the same the things that have worked for colleges, especially brick and mortar colleges up to now, aren't going to work, because you're going to be dealing with students who already are established in life. They have jobs, they have places that they live already. They don't need dormitories, they don't need the
Mhm.
same kind of hand holding anymore. So universities aren't going to be able to make money in the same ways that they have, and they're going to have to restructure their schedules and their budgets, and how many vice presidents they have. How many vice presidents does a freaking university need?
Yeah,
Looking at
yeah,
you, University of Montana, with like 7 vice presidents, unnecessary.
yeah. And
um
like, I hate to say it, as much as I love my job and my role so, so much, and I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I am a part of that blow. Like
mm,
I have to kind of admit that, right? So my job is a coordinator. So I'm the research apprenticeship program coordinator at the Honors College at WVU. And what I do, I pair undergraduate first year and second year students with faculty mentors where they go, they do research, it culminates in a presentation at our annual symposium. It is the most fulfilling, amazing work I could ever dream of doing. I love the students that I work with. But despite me loving my job, when I think about stripping down universities to their bare bones and just giving the students the classes that they need to graduate, I'm not a part of that equation. And as much as that
mm.
hurts, I kind of wonder, I mean, it would be selfish for me to just sit here and think about my own trajectory. That's for my own reflection.
But it's also fair, yeah.
It's fair, right? But then, I think about what would happen to all of my fabulous colleagues who really do like
Mm.
groundbreaking and wonderful work at our institution. Like, how bloated does administration need to get for it to say enough? Like, I don't know. I wonder, because I totally agree about having 10 million different vice presidents. Like, vice president of what? Right?
Yeah.
But where do you cut the meat off the bone?
Well, I mean, in my utopian future, once everything in the US kind of blows up and then settles back down and then builds itself back up. So we're talking like 50 to 80 years in the future if we don't all die in nuclear warfare. Um Honestly though, that kind of is the dream.
Right?
Um
Fingers crossed.
but if we don't and we make it through, my desire for that time and education is that governments will start to see research as necessary. So instead of needing to hire 20 vice presidents, instead of needing huge faculties for very few students, instead they can hire on researchers who are employed by the university to research like they used to. Like, Einstein didn't teach constantly. He was a researcher at his institution who taught a couple courses because they needed to fill some holes. So that would be my my like utopian solution to that, is to say, okay, you got this higher degree and we know you want to research, so let's find you the funds and the spot to do that. I know that's going to be crazy difficult and would require the government to fund research in a way that it hasn't before in the US, but other countries do that. So clearly it's
Uh,
possible.
No, I know, and I do agree because I feel like faculty are so goddamn tired. Like I see it in the
Yeah.
faculty I work with, right? Like they typically, when faculty members sign on to an institution, they have a three-part contract, which is research, teaching, and service. That's at least how it works at WVU. If it's a research-oriented institution like Pitt, that might look a little bit different, but that's kind of what the contract looks like for WVU. So folks at my institution who are professors are expected to research, which research, talking grant. I mean, we all know
Yeah.
grants, writing, the conferences. I mean, that should be a job, like you were saying, within and of itself. And then teaching courses to undergraduates, right? Like the amount of email inquiries that you can expect to get from those undergrads is a job within and of itself.
Yeah.
Despite the planning for the course, you could organize it the most magnificent way that you possibly could, and students would still have so many questions about where to find like the syllabus, right? So that's
Yeah.
the of it. And
Which
then
is why you get those professors who teach the 101 courses, and you can tell that they just do not want to be there. And it's not because they don't like the students, it's because they have such little time, they would rather be utilizing it for niche topics or for things that are way more interesting than talking about why we don't talk about Freud.
yeah, or getting graduate assistants to do it. Like a lot of those
Yeah.
one-on-one classes, at least like at WVU, institutions like that, they get like GTAs, GRAs to teach them,
Yeah.
which is fascinating. And then the third part of a professor's contract is service. What does that service mean? I don't know. Service, I think, means for some professors serving on committees. It really depends on your department. Like, does that mean like service projects? I don't know. But those are three parts of the contract that faculty members are doing. And there's a common misconception, by myself included, when I was an undergrad, that faculty members are really rich. They're not. They're usually like my favorite professor, his salary was available. To everyone I looked, it was like 86K or something like that. To me, that's a
To me,
millionaire.
that's rich.
That's
To me,
rich.
that's, oh my God,
But
I would live like a king.
like in the scope of like America, and especially with the economy the
Yeah.
way that it is, like that's not a lot of dough, y'all. Like unless you're teaching like classes at the med school and you have an MD, you're getting paid like under 100K.
Which this is one of those moments where I come in and I'm like, and this is why I left the US and I'm applying to PhDs in Europe, because people, there's so many PhD students who have been complaining about their stipends at European universities, and I'm like, tell me what your stipend is. Oh, 35,000 euros a year. Excuse me? For a stipend?
I literally made
You don't get to complain
$19,000.
about that.
Yeah, I made $19,000, Ira, in my graduate research assistantship at WVU. Like I had to go into so much credit card debt.
My first master's, I was a graduate teaching assistant. I taught a classroom course, and I had a full private studio of 20 voice students because I was getting my MM in opera, on top of the classes that I had to take and the performing I had to do and choir and all of these other things, grading for other classes. And I had a tuition waiver, so that's fair. But then other than that, I was paid 900 a month.
Oh, yeah, I think I made 1,200. So I was like maybe like 300
Yeah.
more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh? And where
And
did
I
you
mean, I
get
got very lucky in that Missoula, Montana, I found a room in a boarding house for 400 a month, but still.
I
So
mean, it's
like,
just yeah. Yeah. It's
um, but anyway, besides all of that, let's transition into the fun part of the podcast, the synthesis questions. Yay! So this is a series of 7 questions that I ask all of my guests, and I totally just blanked out what my phone's password was to pull them up, but we're good. So the first question is, what is your typical executive dysfunction and or rest day activity?
Oh boy. So I mine is interesting because I work full time and I'm doing my PhD full time. So I, with how crazy my job can be, I recruit students for a program, it's a whole thing. I need to take a week off during spring break and just write. I'm closing myself away. I might get like a hotel room in Morgantown or something, make the necessary edits I need to my dissertation so I can get participants this summer, right? But my typical rest day is just looking like taking 4 naps a day. Like if I'm off from
Mm-hmm.
work and I have like a snow day, I'm such a sleeper. I am a hobbyist sleeper. I have been tired since the day I was born. I'm hoping that not something that's wrong with me, but I'm also very proudly on Lexapro. And Lexapro, I feel like makes me even more tired than I am. So I require a lot of naps. So if I'm not working or working on my dissertation or thinking about working on my dissertation, I'm definitely taking a nap and avoiding the world. And that's how I deal with it. And I love it.
Totally fair. My grandpa used to call that disciple syndrome because in the Bible, the disciples, when they were stressed out, went and slept.
I'm one of them, baby. Count me in.
Yep. Yep. Question number 2. What is your favorite setting for working on your research?
Oh, my favorite setting is honestly like my office. I somehow got so lucked out with like this 2 window office that is so huge. And I'll go in on Saturdays, I'll close the door. I only have key card access. I'm the only one in there. And I just write and I research and I get in my zone. And I typically just have so much gratitude when I'm in those moments because this is what I've worked so hard for so long and made so many sacrifices for. So for me, my research has to be done in a closed off space with me alone, typically very warm with a lot of sense going so I can focus and graduate someday.
Someday. The dream. What is one thing an advisor has told you that has stuck with you? And this could be good or bad.
Oh man. Oh, I want to say one thing, but I don't want to. So my advisor, when I sent her my draft for my first 3 chapters, she didn't mean it like this because this woman is amazing and she's so busy. And sometimes, especially when you're dealing with a lot of different things, you're just sending out an email to get the task done. And she was like, "Hey, Shan, yeah, I stopped reading what you sent me after chapter 1. It felt like I just laughed like I was crying because she was so right. You know, I'm not someone that's going to go up against my advisor. She's had so many PhD students. I'm one of many. She obviously knows what she's talking about. She's like a top scholar in her field. I have so much love and respect for her. But that was a moment where I was like, holy shit, I need to reevaluate. So I think that moment, you know, as much as it hurt, and she did not mean for it to hurt because she was just, you know, trying to give me
Mm-hmm.
feedback on about her day, is that the process is not perfect, and despite me getting this far there is still so much that I have to learn. You know, despite passing comprehensive exams with flying colors, I still need to learn how to be better at being a PhD student. And all of us face that. And we all hate that we're not perfect at it. But there are moments where that imperfection kind of shines through. And that was mine. And that was a very much needed wake up call that will stay with me. And Aaron, if you're listening to this for some reason, I'm so sorry. And I will do better next time. I promise.
And honestly, I think the best critiques I've ever gotten are the really blunt ones like that. Like when I was last application cycle, when I got turned down by all of my schools, there was only one school that actually sent me feedback, and their feedback was so cutting and so just like, if you read it in one light, it was so cruel. And I read it the first time and I was just like, I fell apart and I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm never researching again. And then
Yep.
I put it away and came back to it a week later and reread it and was just like, I'm just going to try this again and pretend like they meant it help in a helpful way. And I read it again and I was like, wait a second, this actually is really helpful advice. It just sounds very harsh.
I needed the ego death because, as you know, Ira is
Yeah.
someone who has 2 master's degrees now and is going into your PhD. Like, it is just the journey of the ego death all day, every day. Like, if you thought you were the shit coming in, you will think that you're not shit coming out. Like, I genuinely think I needed that as a person thing. But it was
Yeah.
one of those moments where my ego was really hurt and it needed to be. So I am excited because I honestly haven't opened up the feedback because I've been so scared of it and myself. But I'm glad that you mentioned that because now I'm going to look at it and I'm going to feel better about it and I'm going to do the
Yeah.
damn
You should.
thing.
If you could choose any other area of research, what would you choose and why?
Oh my God, Ira, you were like out of so many people that I've talked to, you have the best questions, and I just want you to know that I so
Thank you.
appreciate you for it. English for sure, English or creative writing. I initially wanted to go for a Shakespeare PhD because my favorite
Mm,
professor of all time, Dr. John Brownlee Lamb, was teaching a Shakespeare course, and I actually met my partner in that course, which is a funny story. But I loved it. Like I hated Shakespeare in high school and the way that he taught it and the way that it aligned with, the other courses that I was taking in my English degree program. So I wanted to do that and then figured out that I actually didn't want to do that. And then I wanted to go into an MFA program for creative writing, possibly get a PhD in it because one of my friends ended up doing that. And I just didn't have enough confidence in my writing to pursue it. So I ended up going in for higher education for my master's and PhD. And I'm really happy where I ended up. But sometimes I do wonder what it would have been like if I got like an MFA instead.
yeah. Sometimes it takes that one professor who's really passionate about their subject to finally open the door. That was me in history. I hated history until my master's in music, and I had a professor who was teaching history of musical theater and would get so animated that he would jump around in front of us and be like, this is what we do here and this is what this show's about. And he would do little like stick figure drawings to explain the plots of the musicals, and it just kind of it humanized it for me in a way that it hadn't been before. So yeah, sometimes it just takes that one professor that's just so passionate that it rubs off on you and you catch that shine.
Yeah.
Um, who is one other academic whose research you really admire?
Oh, Dr. Gina Garcia. She does a lot of work on HSIs, which are Hispanic serving institutions, and she taught me so much about what it's like to be a Black and brown student in higher education in America. Like, she is Hispanic herself. She went to college in California, had a really great experience there, but she was so relentless in her pursuit for social justice, which I really, really appreciate. It was before Trump got reelected, so things felt a little bit more hopeful then, but she's just such an amazing and inspiring woman and really allowed me to evaluate my own whiteness and how that plays a role in my decision making as a scholar practitioner, and how it's important to always make space for those Black and brown voices. So Dr. Gina Garcia is definitely one of my favorite academics out there. She's awesome.
Amazing. What is a question you've never been able to answer?
Oh, I think in my research now, and I thought that I answered it in the draft that I sent to my advisor, but what exactly is the West Virginia context? Like this was brought up to
Mm.
me by another faculty member in our program, and ever since he said that, I cannot get it out of my brain. It's like the best earworm ever. But like, what exactly does the West Virginia context entail? Whether it's economically, place wise, socially, like what does that look like and how does that go up to bat against a lot of the stereotypes that you and I have been talking about today?
And then last question, what font do you wish you could present your research in?
I Times New Roman forever. Like, thank God someone is finally asking me these questions. I would tattooed on my forehead. I hate Arial. I hate Calibri. I wish that the entire world was forced to literally use Times New Roman because it is my favorite font ever, and it should be the only font ever, in my humble opinion.
I enjoy serifs. I don't necessarily enjoy Times New Roman as much as others, but I appreciate a serif.
Georgia is good too. I like Georgia as a font. It's
That's
very
my favorite. Georgia and
yeah.
Garamond are my favorites.
Well, I can see it. I can definitely see it, Ira. I think
It's
one of the
because they look like old classic literature
yeah,
versus
one of the
Times New Roman feels legal.
I think that like when you sent me kind of like the write up for this podcast, it was in one of those fonts, which I appreciated and clocked.
It was probably in Garamond.
I think it was. I think it was.
Well, thank you so much for being on the pod. Can you tell everyone where to find you?
Yeah, so if you're interested in following along my journey, which I do a lot of fashion content, I talk about my PhD sometimes on my Instagram, not really on my TikTok. That's for fashion content. You can follow me at Dr. Idiot on Instagram. I put PhD updates there. I throw a fit or two. It's mostly my cats, and it's a really good time if you want to kind of follow along in what's happening in my PhD life and just in West Virginia in general.
Honestly, you have the greatest style, and I love your fashion videos so much.
Thank you. It just comes from thrifting. I had a good friend in high school
Mm.
who I looked up to so much, and she was so good at thrifting, and she really got me into it. I wasn't good at thrifting until like a few years after she had left for like New York City. But it really sparked this love for fashion within me, and I'm just now addicted to Depop, and it's where all of my money goes. Unfortunately.
Well, thank you again so much for being on the pod, and we will talk to you all later. Bye.
Bye.
A huge thank you again to Shan for being a guest on the podcast. And what did I say? It was really an incredible conversation that led me to rethink a lot of the things that I've thought about West Virginia and the South and Appalachia. And I think it's a good lesson for all of us to kind of deconstruct how we got to where we are and how we think about places and people. And that's one reason why education is so important, and why I love looking at humans, is figuring out how to humanize the people that we see, and not just put our expectations and labels onto them. So thank you for joining me today. If you would like to submit a question to myself or my guests to be read on the podcast, you can send that to our Instagram. That's our what is our Instagram? I suddenly forgot. Our Instagram is at Hypothesis Pod. You can also send us an email at podcasthypothesis@gmail.com. Or if you would like to hear your voice on the podcast, you can send us a voice question on SpeakPipe. That's speakpipe.com/hypothesispodcast. Again, that's speakpipe.com/hypothesispodcast. We would love to answer questions on the podcast, so please send those in. It's been a while since we've had a question, so please engage. The best way to get our podcast out there is for you to engage with it. And that includes, if you want to read the articles that we discussed in the podcast, those are all up on Substack. That's iramcintosh.substack.com. iramcintosh.substack.com. You can also follow us on TikTok at The Gay Ethnographer, or myself on Instagram at Ira A. McIntosh. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends. This podcast will not grow, and we cannot reach more people if you don't share. So please tell your friends about the pod. We'd be so grateful. And when you listen, please download the episode. That will help our numbers in the long run. So let's fight misinformation together. Have a wonderful day and go read a book. Bye.